Hey guys, welcome back to Rudder Innovations, where today we're going to be learning how to swap out some front wheel bearings on this Toyota Highlander. Here we go. All right, we're going to start by placing the jack right up underneath this crimped part of the frame, and then we're going to raise it up and we're going to leave a little bit of space to put the jack stand there. Before getting the tire all the way off the ground, I'm going to break all these lug nuts loose, and they're 22 millimeters. Now I'm going to remove the caliper bracket from the knuckle there and there. I use a breaker bar and 17 millimeter socket to break loose the two bolts holding on the caliper bracket and finish removing them with my impact drill. All right, before I remove the caliper bracket, I undid the two 17 millimeter bolts, and now I'm going to pull to compress that caliper piston just a little bit so that the brake pads aren't pushing against the rotor. I'm going to take a little piece of rope that's tied up to my strut, and then so I don't leave all this weight on this brake line, I'm going to remove the caliper and caliper bracket, and then I'm going to tie it up with this rope. Before you remove the axle nut, if it's rusted like this, you might want to put some WD-40 on there, and you also want to uncrimp the washer in this groove, so you can use a pair of needle nose pliers and a hammer. Just hammer the needle nose pliers in there, or a screwdriver, in order to open that up before you unscrew it. All right, so I got a 30 millimeter impact socket to be able to take off this drive axle nut. Next, we'll remove this dust shield by using a 10 millimeter socket or wrench in order to take these off. Next, we'll remove the wheel speed sensor, and this is a 10 millimeter bolt. There's also a plastic clip right here that you'll pull on both sides to release it from the knuckle. Now what we're going to do is remove the strut from the knuckle, and this is a 22 millimeter socket. And I'm using an adjustable wrench on the other side to hold it. I recommend using the fixed wrench on the nut side and the socket or breaker bar on the head of the bolt, unlike how I started to remove these. All right, now we're going to remove the tie rod. We'll start with this pin, and then we'll get the nut and we'll break it loose. This is a 17 millimeter nut. All right, I threaded the nut back on there, and then I'm going to use a piece of wood and a mallet just to tap it loose. All right, now we're going to remove these bolts from the strut and the knuckle, which will allow our knuckle to drop down. It will also allow us to push our CV axle out of the way. I had to reinstall the axle nut and give it a tap to remove it from the knuckle. Underneath the ball joint is this bolt and these two nuts that can be removed to remove the rest of the knuckle. The ball joint and nuts are all 17 millimeter. All right, so we got the entire knuckle removed. Now we're going to remove this ring right here. Be careful, just try not to bend it the best you can as you remove it. You can use something like a pry bar or a flathead screwdriver just to pry it up. All right, you can see this little rib right here, which is what holds it in. So it came out easily with the flathead screwdriver, and now I'm gonna take this crimp ring right here. I'm gonna get some pliers and pull this together to get this ring out. You ever feel like you're playing a game of whatever that surgery game is? That's what that was like. Before I hammer this out of here, I'm gonna just put these back on so I don't mess up any of the threads whenever I'm trying to beat it out. All right, so I used a 2x6 just to cut and screwed it together, and then I just put some screws through the holes. It's not gonna stop it from, it's really gonna stop it from going side to side, but not so much up and down. So here and here, and I just set this one underneath it. And so what I'm gonna use is this 32mm socket to hit the hub down into my workbench and remove it from the bearing. All right, I think that was it. All right, so we did get the inner race of the bearing out. What we'll have to do, from what I've seen, people heat this up and then they can take it off of this hub. If we can't get it all the way off the end, we'll use our Dremel cutting disc to cut through and then break it the rest of the way. The heating hammer and chisel accomplished little to nothing, but the cutting disc did a great job. When I got towards the end of the cut, there was an audible pop when the bearing race split, which loosened its grip on the hub. All right, I'm gonna put this race back in here. Now we're gonna press this bearing out. All right, we're gonna start by pressing the bearing out, and it's a little bit of a balancing act on this press. We're gonna take our sleeve right there, and then I'll put another one in, and then we'll start to lower it. Then once we get close, you just wanna make sure it's in the center. All right, and then we can go ahead and press that bearing out. There we go, that bearing's moving out now. All right. All right, there's our old bearing. Let's get our new one. We can press that one in. All right, we have the knuckle upside down, ready to receive the brand new bearing. I am gonna put a little bit of bearing grease around the outside of this, and then we're gonna use the press to press it in. All right, I'm gonna take the old bearing and set it on top of the new bearing, and then I'm gonna press both of them down together. See it pressing down in there. We'll push it down until it bottoms out. I think we're bottomed out there. Put the lift back up. You can take it and just look and make sure it's flush here with the front of the knuckle. All right, so we got the new bearing in here. I'm gonna take my snap ring, I'm gonna put it in, and if you have a good pair of needle nose pliers, you should be able to just hold the snap ring closed and insert it all the way down in there like that. All right, you're gonna get your old bearing, then you're gonna set the hub on top of it. And then you're gonna take your new bearing and your knuckle and make sure it's even and set on top of that. Then you can take this or whatever your spacer is, and we're gonna need a little more room. We want to make sure that that is not on top of the snap ring. Now we're going to push the spindle or the hub into the bearing. We're going to turn this back and forth just to make sure it gets seated right. And we get it into the bearing. It kind of looks like there's a little bit more left to go. And that looks about right. So I'm gonna loosen this up. We got it pressed in. There's not a gap here, and you can see it's about where it's at on the bottom. It's got that little bevel side and it comes up right to the bottom. So it's how it's supposed to be. It's good. We have our new bearing in. At this point, we're gonna remove the ball joint, and I have the knuckle loose from the shock and from the tie rod over here. And I'm going to use my breaker bar to try and get enough leverage to break this castle nut off. And I've already pushed the pin out of it with some needle nose pliers and a little hammer. So I was able to break it loose. My breaker bar wound up knocking over the camera. See how easily this ball joint's gonna come out of this. And I might use a hammer. I don't really care about damaging the threads because we're gonna have a new ball joint. If you're not replacing the ball joint like I am, I believe the bolt and 2 nuts that attach the ball joint to the control arm are all 94 foot-pounds of torque. I was just gonna replace this, but then I decided to do the whole control arm because, as you can see, it's kind of dry rotted right here. And apparently people say that you're gonna have to replace those after 200,000 miles, and we're pretty close. All right, we got our brand new control arm with the new ball joint installed already. It comes with it installed. You can get it separately, but I just decided to do the whole thing. So we got our brand new bearing pressed in there. We got our brand new control arm. Also have a video of doing this brand new strut. Let's go ahead and put our knuckle back in. Put our castle nut on there, get that tightened down. In order to hold this thing still while I'm tightening it up, I am gonna put the knuckle into the strut. All right. All right. Also, you can get this tie rod, stick it down in here, take the castle nut, put that on there. The torque specs for the ball joint are 90 foot-pounds. I also have my cotter pin. I'm gonna stick back in here. If you left your CV axle installed, move it to the side in order to tighten the castle nut. I did have to tighten it up a little bit more in order for my pinhole to line up with the castle nut. We're gonna go ahead and put this, I believe it's a dust shield, back in. You wanna line up this slot right here where your speed sensor is gonna go. This honestly probably would have been easier to do if I had done it on a workbench, but I didn't think about it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick this hammer up underneath here just to hold the knuckle, and then I'm gonna use this block of wood just so I can evenly press this thing down. Turn the strut a little bit just to give me some room. That should be good. Looks like it's pressed all the way in there. I'm gonna go ahead and take our CV axle and slip it through the knuckle. Just rotate it until those splines match up. Turn this strut to where it lines up with the knuckle. I'm gonna put one of my bolts here through it to hold everything in place. And we'll wiggle this thing through. There we go. It's coming out of the front over here, if you can see that. If you haven't already connected your tie rod, go ahead and connect it and the top bolt of your strut after sliding your CV axle through. The torque specs for the bottom portion of the strut is 155 foot-pounds. I'm gonna tighten up the outside of this tie rod. Its torque specs are 36 foot-pounds of torque. Don't forget to put your little cotter pin in. Bend that back. I'm gonna put this thing back on. It goes like this. All right. Here we go. Just line up your holes. These are 10 millimeters. Go ahead and get all those started. You don't need to go crazy tight on these, just a dust shield. but you also don't want it falling off. 4 of these total. Drop our wheel sensor back in. I'm gonna remove this bolt I have in here. Drop it in. Then we'll stick that bolt back through there. Don't get crazy. Just want it snug. All right. Get our brake rotor on. And now we can get our brake caliper and bracket back on. Put a lug nut on just to hold this rotor on. All right, and then we'll take our rope, loosen our caliper bracket, drop it down, slide it over. All right, bolt, get it through here. There we go. All right, let's get the other bolt. All right, we're gonna tighten up these caliper bracket bolts to 79 foot-pounds of torque. All right. Don't forget to put this clip back. There's little holes in the strut, and this is for your wheel sensor. Here's our CV axle nut. Now that we've got this stuff back on, we're gonna tighten it down, then we'll put the torque wrench on it. And it needs to be tightened to 217 foot-pounds of torque. I'm just gonna put my foot on it. There you go. Now, you're not done. Once you tighten that, you wanna take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and punch right here where that groove is. You're gonna hammer this nut down in there. I'm just pushing that nut down to where it doesn't come off. Got our axle nut back on. Let's go ahead and get our tire back on. I always recommend getting these started by hand. We're gonna do these 100 foot-pounds of torque. All right, go ahead and jack up the vehicle. Got to where we can remove our jack stand. We're gonna lower the vehicle. We're done. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you like this video, like it. And if you're watching on a medium, you can subscribe. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Peace and God bless.